Hey Jennifer, before I flip this over to you, Courtney, and for a suggestion on replacing the buzzer, was the sound of the dude getting hit by the twisted tea can.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Courtney. That's fantastic. Let's do that.
Let us know in the comments, malcontents. Is that something that you can like? If that's something you can like, let us know in the comments. I think it's a great idea, and I've got
Sure.
the skills and the tools to make it happen. So let us know in the comments. All right, Jennifer. I know that you've got a warning before we dive into this story, and then we're gonna dive into this story.
Okay. So do you want me to do the warning? Is
What's
that what
that?
you're telling me? You want me to do the warning?
Yeah, yeah.
So just kind of a warning for anybody that might be potentially triggered by this. This story covers some pretty intense episode of domestic violence. And so at the end of the story, I'll also give out the hotline number for the domestic violence in case any of you are potentially experiencing this and feel like you need some help.
Yeah, this is a tough issue. Do you want me to roll the clip?
Please do.
Okay.
Troubling story that developed in recent days involving now former Seahawks tackle Chad Wheeler. He was jailed over the weekend on charges of suspicion of domestic violence. The details are shocking. You can find them online. We've got links to the stories at PFT. The Seahawks, after I think just hoping they could let nature take its course, he was going to be a restricted free agent. You just don't tender him. You let him go. It never comes up again. They eventually had to act. They issued this statement, which I think was appropriate. And it was a day of a lot of people wondering why the Seahawks weren't saying anything, why the NFL wasn't saying anything. The NFL told me they were reviewing the matter under the personal conduct policy. But the details were so shocking that it cried out for something more immediate. And there were other players, current and former players, that were basically saying that this is not acceptable. Demario Davis, everyone that represents the NFL should speak out against this. And also Benjamin Watson said, let this be a wake-up call. And the NFL had its wake-up call with Ray Rice. I think that when we see guys like Ezekiel Elliott get suspended for 6 games, and I know it took time for it to happen. It didn't happen immediately, but he was never even arrested. When you have an arrest, when you have credible allegations, when you have a guy who's placed on $400,000 bail, that is a more serious matter for the NFL.
Wow. Just
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, Chad Wheeler, the now former offensive tackle, was arrested on what they considered suspicion of felony domestic violence in Kent. For reference, Chad is 310 pounds. The victim is 145 pounds, so she's my size. That's a huge size differential. So police were called to the residence because she had actually gotten into the bathroom and called for help, because what happened is he had asked her to bow to him and she refused. So he choked her unconscious and continued to choke her. And when she finally came to, asked, "Wow, how are you still alive?" She then went into the bathroom, called some friends, called the police. When the police found her, she had a bloodied face and a dangling arm. He initially was resistant. They had to tase him, which basically did not affect him. And finally, they were able to arrest him. So he was released on bail. Of course, his bail was $400,000, not something most normal people could afford. She's said that he was not on his bipolar medication, which has been an issue. He has since come out and apologized and said that they are both getting the help that they need. This is particularly problematic, though, for a couple of reasons. First, the way in which the Seahawks addressed the issue. They basically just punted on it and gave some, I don't know, something that equates to thoughts and prayers. But also because if you look at statistics, and I was looking at statistics today, even back in 2016, I couldn't find any more current reports, 31% of people convicted or accused of domestic violence reoffended within 3 years. and 44% reoffended within 10 years. So domestic violence, I'm a survivor, usually does not happen in one isolated incident. So you have to wonder how long this has been going on. When you're a victim, you want to make excuses for the person that is abusing you. Oftentimes they apologize, you believe it, there's this weird cycle that you get into, and things get better for a little while, and then things go back and sometimes get worse. This is something that needs to be taken into consideration and talked about more publicly, I think, because there's a lot of shame involved with being a victim of domestic violence. And, oftentimes when you come out, I had an incident where I was choked with a seatbelt, and a cop was extremely condescending to me and said, "Why did you stay? Why have you stayed this long?" Basically, if this was ongoing, or I don't see like significant marks on your neck. It escalated into stalking. So, usually there are other behaviors that accompany this that we can't just chalk up to one manic episode, which is what he called it. So again, he has since publicly apologized, chalked the incident up to a manic episode. He also stated that he and the victim are currently getting the help that they need. The Seahawks, however, took a really long time to come out with a statement. It was extremely disappointing, extremely really weak in its condemnation of the situation and of what happened. They just basically said they were saddened, and that they basically thoughts and prayers to the victim, and he is no longer with our team. So they basically punted it down the field and was like, "Oh, he's not our responsibility anymore," which is also problematic because the NFL and the Seahawks in particular have a really huge female base. So to really kind of minimize that and come out with such a very disappointing statement was really frustrating to see. But I also would just like to take a minute to note that if you are experiencing issues with domestic violence, you're not alone. There are people that you can go to talk to. I know it's scary. I know it can be hard to get out of, and I know it's difficult to talk about. So there's a 24-hour National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. But also, if you feel you're in a situation where you need a restraining order, even though it's a little more difficult during COVID, there are actually advocates that will help you within the court system get you into some kind of safety and make you feel a little bit better about your situation and moving forward. And you know what? I'm always here if anybody needs to talk. I've been there. I know it's hard, and I would be happy to listen.
So there you go. Jennifer, I have several thoughts, and thank you for bringing this story to us tonight. We elected not to show the pictures of the victim. It's victim porn. I feel it's disrespectful to the victim, and they're just awful. The pictures. She is unrecognizable. What he did is unfrickin' believable to her. If you can go find it somewhere else, they're out there. We're not going to show it. The NFL's and the Seahawks in particular, right? Because I don't know how much is good, how much Goodell and the NFL office is involved in what Seahawks are handling this. So don't exactly know where it's coming from, but the handling of this has been terrible. That statement was like a non-statement. It's kind of like, well, we're getting rid of them anyway, which in that clip, right? Even the talking heads in the clip from NBC Sports were positioning it that way. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. He played on your flippin' team. And you've pointed out a lot of good points, right? NFL has a huge female fan base. They do, the breast cancer with the pink uniform, pink gloves and boots and trim and yada, yada, yada. And it just feels like positioning. And I wanted to run this feel-good story like what Anheuser-Busch is doing with their Super Bowl ad money. And I'm like, no, ick. And it's literally ick to me now, not because of Budweiser, not because of you can go look it up. Budweiser's doing stuff, but it's the NFL and it's the whole, it's just, because this, Jennifer, this has been going on for years and years and years, right? We go back to Ray Rice in the elevator. They tried to sweep that under the rug and make it go away. And then even when it came out, or let's even go further back with the dogs, I don't want to get his name wrong. Who was the guy he went to prison for it?
Oh, Michael Vick.
Michael Vick, right?
Yeah.
Michael Vick with the dogs. And he got to go play again. Yeah. Like, what?
No, yeah, the NFL has a huge problem. And I think one of the problems with domestic violence in particular are some of the stereotypes that surround it in the context of it being something that happens to poor people or BIPOC people. And it doesn't, we were talking a little bit about this earlier this week when you brought that story up about shaken baby syndrome and how it was more prevalent for lower income or people of color to be accused and eventually likely convicted of that, while wealthy white people were basically just like, oh, it's an accident, and nobody really questioned that. So we need to take seriously the ways in which domestic violence permeates, relationships regardless of socioeconomic status, and really do more to call attention to it rather than victim shaming and putting out these weak ass statements that basically, say, hey, he's not our problem anymore, but we feel real bad about what happened.
Yeah, and it brings up another topic that I would like to talk about, the dovetail on the issue of like domestic violence, and it dovetails a little bit into child abuse. And it's this other story, and I don't want to take away from the Wheeler story. He's in jail on $400,000 bail, and we're seeing the abuser cycle statements coming from both of them. Oh, we're going to work we're trying to get the help that we need, yada, yada, yada. Right. And you hear these stuff and you're just like, no, it's like there's no fixing this when it's gotten to this point, right? You both need to go separate ways because this will never get better. But it's not even a but's the wrong word. Kellyanne Conway on Monday night essentially revenge porned her own daughter on Twitter. And she took it down quickly. And then her daughter, Claudia, made this video that is very clearly heavily edited because you can see where all the cuts are in it, and like, I love my mom. It's mother-daughter shit. And, please don't. There's so much in these stories that tie into systemic. Personally, I think he's an NFL player. His bail's $400,000. Mm-hmm. That seems light to me for an NFL player, even if he's a journeyman player on a journeyman salary. Generally when somebody does something to that extent, they want to keep him in jail. If any of our audience put topless pictures of their 16-year-old daughters on social media to revenge porn them, they'd be in jail already. There'd be no ifs, ands, buts about it. And poor Claudia is making those exact same excuses and trapped in that exact same cycle, and it's only going to get worse. And, get help, get out.
And I know it's easier said than done, but there are resources available. But yeah, no, I could never imagine. I have a 16-year-old daughter. I could never imagine, no matter how mad I've ever been at her, and I've been mad at her, that I could ever even fathom doing something like that. That's just such a gross thing to do to your child.